When we talk about love today, we often speak in the language of extremes. Monogamy is either romanticized as the ultimate expression of loyalty or criticized as an unrealistic expectation that modern life has rendered almost obsolete. And yet, here we are, still desiring deep connection, still yearning for intimacy that lasts, even as our impulses push us toward novelty and curiosity. There is a tension in every long-term partnership, a quiet, sometimes unspoken negotiation between the longing for stability and the thrill of desire. Modern relationships ask questions that previous generations never had to confront. Can we be faithful and still crave adventure? Can we love someone and still be tempted by someone else? Can monogamy survive in a world designed for endless choice, instant gratification, and the constant reframing of what it means to be fulfilled? The answers are rarely simple, because love itself is never simple. It is messy. It is human. And it is often, paradoxically, at its most profound when we confront the very desires that threaten it. Tonight, I invite you to explore not just whether monogamy is possible, but what it truly asks of us emotionally, psychologically, and spiritually. To look honestly at our desires without judgment. To examine the delicate architecture of trust, temptation, and intimacy that underpins our closest relationships. And perhaps, in doing so, to discover that the question is not whether monogamy is a fantasy, but how we can engage with that fantasy in a way that honors both our longing for connection and our need for freedom. The tension between desire and security in modern relationships is one of the most profound and persistent challenges that couples face today. On one hand, there is a deep human longing for stability, a need for a partner who is reliable, present, and committed. This craving for security is rooted not only in biology but in our emotional development. It is the assurance that someone will be there, day after day, through the highs and lows, offering comfort, care, and a sense of belonging. Security allows us to feel safe enough to be vulnerable, to share our fears and dreams, and to cultivate intimacy over time. It is the foundation upon which trust is built and the anchor that keeps a relationship steady amidst the unpredictable currents of life. Yet, alongside this need for stability, there exists an equally compelling force, the desire for novelty, excitement, and the unpredictable spark that makes us feel alive. Desire is not merely about sexual attraction, it is about being seen in a way that awakens curiosity, wonder, and longing. It is about the thrill of being known and simultaneously mysterious, the push and pull that keeps passion vibrant and alive. In a long-term partnership, this desire is often at odds with the very security that nurtures emotional safety. Predictability, routine, and familiarity, the hallmarks of security, can, over time, dull desire, creating a subtle tension between wanting closeness and fearing boredom, between needing connection and craving freedom. Modern relationships amplify this tension because they exist within a cultural landscape that both celebrates and challenges monogamy. We live in an era of endless possibilities, where alternative lifestyles, diverse relationship structures, and constant exposure to others' lives through social media create both opportunity and temptation. The pull of desire becomes more complicated when we are confronted daily with images, stories, and possibilities that make us question whether what we have is enough. This constant comparison can lead to guilt, anxiety, or dissatisfaction, even when our relationships are fundamentally strong. Navigating this tension requires a level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence that many of us are only beginning to develop. It involves understanding that desire and security are not mutually exclusive, but rather two threads that must be woven together carefully. Couples must learn to communicate openly about their needs, to acknowledge the natural ebb and flow of passion, and to create spaces in which both connection and curiosity can coexist. It is an ongoing negotiation, a delicate dance that requires mindfulness, courage, and an acceptance of the inherent contradictions in human intimacy. The paradox of wanting both constancy and excitement challenges us to confront our own expectations, our fears of loss, and our assumptions about what it means to love deeply. It asks us to consider whether the longing for desire is a threat to our bonds, or whether it is a vital force that, if embraced thoughtfully, can breathe life into the very security we seek. The cultural evolution of intimacy has reshaped the way we understand love, commitment, and fidelity, profoundly influencing modern relationships. Throughout history, the expectations of romantic partnerships were often clearly defined by societal norms, religious doctrines, or economic necessity. Marriage and monogamy were rarely just personal choices, they were embedded in the fabric of culture, law, and tradition. Stability, family lineage, and social cohesion often took precedence over emotional fulfillment or personal desire, and the idea of romantic passion was sometimes considered secondary or even dangerous. People were conditioned to prioritize duty, loyalty, and social conformity, and in this context, monogamy was a largely unquestioned expectation, a framework that guided intimate relationships and minimized ambiguity. In contrast, contemporary society offers a vastly different set of possibilities and pressures. Romantic love is now idealized as the cornerstone of a fulfilling life, and personal happiness is considered a legitimate priority. The expectation is not only to be committed but also to be deeply satisfied, emotionally, intellectually, and sexually. At the same time, modern culture presents an abundance of alternative narratives about love. Polyamory, open relationships, casual dating, and digital intimacy all challenge the traditional monogamous paradigm. These shifts create both opportunity and confusion, as people are now tasked with negotiating personal values, desires, and ethical boundaries within a landscape that no longer provides a single, universally accepted blueprint for relationships. Technology and media have accelerated this evolution by exposing individuals to a constant stream of possibilities and lifestyles, often highlighting the tension between reality and aspiration. Social media platforms showcase curated versions of romance, desire, and freedom, which can provoke comparison, longing, or dissatisfaction. Online dating apps further amplify the sense of choice, making it easier to imagine alternatives even within established relationships. The result is a cultural environment in which intimacy is simultaneously celebrated and complicated, where the boundaries of fidelity and commitment are questioned more openly than ever before. This evolution also impacts our emotional expectations. People are increasingly aware of their own needs and desires, and there is a stronger emphasis on self-expression and personal growth within relationships. Love is no longer solely about survival or social expectation, it is now intimately connected to identity, autonomy, and fulfillment. While this cultural shift has liberated many to pursue more authentic and meaningful connections, it has also made the management of desire and commitment more challenging. The historical assumptions that once provided clarity about what intimacy should look like have eroded, leaving couples to navigate uncharted emotional terrain. Understanding this evolution is crucial for anyone seeking to maintain meaningful partnerships. It requires recognizing that modern intimacy exists at the intersection of tradition and innovation, stability and change, personal satisfaction and shared responsibility. Couples must learn to reconcile these often competing forces, to articulate their needs, and to negotiate the unspoken rules of their relationships in ways that honor both their individuality and their connection. The psychological complexity of monogamy lies at the heart of many of the challenges that modern couples face, revealing how deeply human desires, fears, and fantasies shape the way we engage in committed relationships. Monogamy is often presented as a simple contract, one partner only, indefinitely. Yet beneath this apparent simplicity exists a web of conflicting emotions, unconscious drives, and societal pressures that make true exclusivity far more intricate than it appears. Humans are not wired for rigid patterns of behavior, we are creatures of curiosity, novelty, and imagination. The mind frequently strays toward what is absent, unknown, or forbidden, creating internal tension that can feel both exciting and threatening within the context of a committed partnership. Desire is rarely static. It evolves, fluctuates, and sometimes conflicts with our own values. Even individuals deeply committed to monogamy may experience fantasies, fleeting attractions, or longings that challenge their sense of loyalty. These internal experiences are not inherently problematic, they are part of the human condition, but they become significant when left unacknowledged or suppressed. The psychological challenge of monogamy is learning to integrate these desires without allowing them to undermine the relationship. This requires self-awareness, reflection, and an understanding that feelings of attraction to others do not automatically indicate a failure of love, but rather reveal the complex layers of human emotion. Fear is another layer of complexity. Fear of loss, fear of inadequacy, and fear of judgment often coexist with the desire for closeness. Partners may struggle to communicate honestly about their impulses because of shame or guilt, inadvertently creating emotional distance. At the same time, the very act of committing exclusively can heighten vulnerability. When one invests in a single partner, the stakes feel immense. Any threat, real or imagined, can trigger anxiety, jealousy, or possessiveness. Monogamy, in this sense, is not only a test of fidelity but also a test of emotional resilience, requiring individuals to confront their insecurities while maintaining trust and intimacy. Societal expectations further complicate this landscape. Cultural narratives frequently portray monogamy as a moral imperative or a benchmark of maturity, even while simultaneously celebrating sexual freedom, exploration, and individual autonomy. This duality produces a cognitive dissonance that can leave partners questioning both themselves and the relationship. The psychological work required in monogamy is therefore continuous, negotiating desire, confronting fear, and reconciling personal impulses with shared commitments. At its core, monogamy challenges us to balance two seemingly opposing needs: the longing for enduring connection and the natural human impulse toward exploration. Understanding this complexity is essential because it shifts the conversation from blame or failure to curiosity and growth, inviting partners to examine their inner worlds and the subtle dynamics that shape their intimacy. Communication and honesty serve as the lifeblood of any relationship attempting to navigate the challenges of monogamy, particularly in the modern context where expectations, desires, and temptations are constantly shifting. Without open dialogue, unspoken assumptions accumulate, creating invisible barriers between partners that can erode intimacy over time. Many couples enter relationships with the belief that love alone is enough to sustain them, yet love without communication is like a house without windows. It may provide shelter, but it lacks transparency, light, and perspective. Honest conversation allows partners to articulate their needs, fears, and desires, transforming potential misunderstandings into opportunities for deeper connection and mutual understanding. The act of speaking openly about one's vulnerabilities is inherently challenging, especially when it involves sensitive topics such as attraction to others, sexual fantasies, or doubts about the relationship structure. These conversations require courage because they expose our most private thoughts, making us feel raw and potentially judged. Yet it is precisely this vulnerability that fosters trust. When partners can share their inner experiences without fear of ridicule or rejection, they create a space where intimacy can flourish. Silence, in contrast, often breeds suspicion, resentment, and emotional distance, as unvoiced concerns fester beneath the surface, coloring interactions in subtle but powerful ways. Honesty also functions as a tool for negotiation. In modern relationships, monogamy is rarely a static agreement. It is a dynamic practice that requires continual alignment between partners. Desires evolve, boundaries shift, and life circumstances change, making ongoing communication essential. Discussing expectations openly allows couples to define what fidelity means to them personally, rather than relying solely on cultural assumptions or rigid definitions. This negotiation is not about rationalizing temptation or seeking loopholes. It is about consciously creating a shared understanding of commitment that respects both individuality and togetherness. Moreover, effective communication involves not only speaking but listening. To navigate monogamy successfully, partners must cultivate the ability to hear one another without defensiveness, to validate feelings without necessarily agreeing, and to respond with empathy rather than judgment. Listening deeply communicates care and acknowledgement, which strengthens relational bonds and reduces the likelihood of misunderstandings escalating into conflict. Ultimately, transparency and honesty are not just moral ideals, they are practical tools for sustaining intimacy, desire, and trust. They allow couples to confront challenges proactively, to manage jealousy and insecurity constructively, and to maintain a connection that is resilient in the face of life's inevitable pressures. When communication is prioritized, the paradoxes of monogamy, desire, curiosity, and loyalty can be addressed with clarity, empathy, and shared intention, creating a foundation where love is continuously negotiated, affirmed, and deepened. Reimagining fidelity requires a shift in perspective from viewing monogamy as a rigid, universal rule to understanding it as a flexible, negotiated practice that can be tailored to the unique needs and values of each relationship. Fidelity is often culturally framed as a strict moral imperative, defined primarily by sexual exclusivity, but in reality, it encompasses a much broader spectrum of commitments: emotional loyalty, honesty, trust, and the conscious choice to prioritize one another's well-being. By reframing fidelity as an ongoing, conscious practice rather than a static obligation, couples can approach commitment with intention and creativity, rather than fear, guilt, or passive compliance. This perspective acknowledges that love and desire are dynamic, and that relationships require continuous attention, negotiation, and mutual responsibility to thrive. Modern partnerships challenge traditional notions of fidelity because they exist in a social landscape where temptation and choice are more visible than ever. The awareness of alternative options, whether through social media, dating apps, or shifting cultural norms, can create anxiety or insecurity, yet it also presents an opportunity to examine what fidelity truly means for the individuals involved. Reimagining fidelity involves asking difficult questions. What do we owe each other emotionally, physically, and psychologically? How do we honor each other's needs while maintaining personal integrity? Can boundaries be renegotiated to reflect evolving desires without compromising trust? These questions invite dialogue and reflection, encouraging partners to define fidelity in ways that are authentic to their connection rather than simply conforming to societal expectations. Fidelity, when reimagined, becomes less about policing behavior and more about cultivating mutual respect and deep presence. It requires emotional literacy, the ability to recognize and articulate feelings of jealousy, desire, or insecurity, and the willingness to engage in conversations that may be uncomfortable but ultimately strengthen the relational bond. By embracing this broader definition, couples can navigate challenges without resorting to secrecy, avoidance, or resentment, fostering an environment where intimacy and desire coexist with trust and commitment. This approach also recognizes the paradox inherent in long-term partnerships: the desire for novelty and the need for stability. Fidelity is not the absence of temptation or curiosity, rather, it is the deliberate choice to prioritize the relationship while acknowledging the complexity of human emotion. By reframing fidelity as a conscious, evolving practice, partners can approach commitment as a collaborative journey, one that honors both individuality and connection, and that allows love to grow in depth and richness over time. Ultimately, reimagining fidelity is an invitation to move beyond rigid prescriptions, to embrace curiosity and honesty, and to create a framework of commitment that is alive, responsive, and reflective of the nuanced realities of modern love.